Let's talk about China's civil war, a decades-long struggle that shaped the fate of nearly a quarter of humanity. On one side, the Nationalists, or Kuomintang, led by Chiang Kai-shek, the official government for a time. On the other, Mao Zedong's Communists, promising radical change for China's peasants. The two sides briefly allied, but their visions for China, land, economy, global role, were irreconcilable. The Nationalists, backed by the US, seemed strong but were plagued by corruption and lost the trust of the rural majority. Mao's communists excelled at guerrilla warfare and won over the countryside by promising land and equality. The war devastated China, but the real victory was in the hearts and minds of the people. By 1949, the communists swept the mainland. Chiang and his followers fled. This wasn't just a regime change, it was a turning point that would reshape global politics for decades. The outcome set the stage for the China we know today. The world would never be the same. The Communists won. On October 1, 1949, Mao declared the People's Republic of China. The Nationalists retreated to Taiwan, claiming to be the true government, a standoff that still shapes geopolitics. On the mainland, the Communists launched sweeping land reforms, seized businesses, and built a command economy. But radical policies like the Great Leap Forward led to catastrophic famine, and the Cultural Revolution tore society apart. After Mao's death, Deng Xiaoping's reforms opened China's economy, sparking a boom that lifted millions from poverty. Yet, the Communist Party kept tight control, no democracy, strict censorship, and little tolerance for dissent. Today's China is a paradox, capitalist in practice, but ruled by a single powerful party. The legacy of the Civil War is a nation transformed, economically dynamic, politically rigid, and globally influential. The scars of revolution remain, shaping China's identity and its place in the world. The world's relationship with China is still defined by the choices made after that victory. The Civil War's outcome continues to echo through every aspect of modern China. Its legacy is both remarkable and deeply complicated. But what if the Nationalists had won? Imagine 1949. Chiang Kai-shek's armies control the mainland. Mao's communists are crushed or exiled. The Republic of China remains the world's most populous nation, a single flip in history, and the 20th century looks radically different. A nationalist victory wouldn't mean instant democracy. Chiang was an authoritarian, ruling with secret police and suppressing dissent. Early years would see a military dictatorship focused on stability and anti-communism. The Cold War would shift. Instead of a communist China allied with the USSR, you'd have a US-aligned anti-communist giant. The Korean and Vietnam Wars might play out very differently, with the domino theory upended. This alternate China would avoid Mao's disasters, no Great Leap Forward, no Cultural Revolution, saving millions of lives. But it would bring its own problems: corruption, inequality, and harsh repression. The world would be unrecognizable, with a new balance of power in Asia and beyond. It's not a utopia, just a different set of challenges and consequences. The story of China would be rewritten, with new winners and losers. History's path would be forever altered. In this alternate world, a victorious nationalist China would start as a one-party state under Chiang Kai-shek's iron rule. Martial law, limited freedoms, and fierce anti-communism would define the early years. Political opposition, labor unions, and activists would be suppressed, with the Kuomintang's conservative elite in control. Over time, as the economy grew and a middle class emerged, pressure for reform could build. Like Taiwan, China might slowly transition toward democracy by the 1980s or 1990s. Messy, gradual, but possible. Ethnic minorities would face forced assimilation under Han nationalism, with little tolerance for regional autonomy. Religion would be less persecuted, but cultural conformity would be strictly enforced. The paradox China could become a freer society earlier, but only after decades of harsh authoritarianism and corruption. Nationalist policies would create tension with minorities, and democracy would come at a high cost. The political landscape would be complex, freer in some ways, but still deeply unequal and controlled. The trade-off: less totalitarianism, but a long, difficult road to reform. A different set of political struggles would define this China. Without communism, China's economy would take a different path. No Great Leap Forward, no forced collectivization. A nationalist China would pursue state-guided capitalism, partnering with powerful corporations, much like South Korea or Japan. Economic growth could start earlier, with booming cities and rapid industrialization by the 1950s or 60s. Foreign investment would flood in, and Made in China would become a global brand decades sooner. But prosperity would be uneven. Coastal cities would thrive, while rural areas lagged behind. The KMT's ties to elites mean little land reform. Millions of peasants would remain poor, fueling inequality and unrest. China would be richer overall, but wealth concentrated in a few hands. The country would avoid Mao's famines, but face classic capitalist challenges, social instability, and vast economic divides. It's a story of rapid growth and deep inequality, a different kind of economic miracle with its own winners and losers. The cost of progress would be paid by those left behind. Socially, a nationalist China would preserve tradition. No cultural revolution, no destruction of ancient culture. Confucian values would be promoted, and religious life would be more open. Temples, churches, and monasteries would flourish. The KMT would tolerate religion, though still wary of groups it couldn't control. Political dissent, however, would be harshly suppressed, free speech and press limited, with censorship of anything deemed subversive. Women's rights might progress more slowly, as the KMT would be less radical than the communists in challenging old norms. Culturally, China would blend ancient tradition with Western modernity. Shanghai and Hong Kong could become global cultural hubs. Chinese art and philosophy would evolve without the violent break of revolution. The world would see a more classical, less revolutionary China, rooted in its past, but open to outside influence. Tradition and faith would thrive, but freedom would remain tightly controlled. A nationalist victory would rewrite the Cold War. Instead of a communist giant, the US would have a powerful ally on the Soviet border, tilting the global balance. The Korean War would likely end with a unified pro-Western Korea. Vietnam's fate would shift without Chinese support for the communists. China would compete with Japan economically and politically, while relations with India might be less hostile. Southeast Asia would see a dominant capitalist China vying for influence. Globally, China would take its UN Security Council seat early, shaping international institutions from the start. It would be a core part of the Western order, not a leader of the non-aligned world. The world would be less multipolar, with a clear divide between East and West, but with China firmly in the Western camp. The Cold War's hotspots would look very different, and the global order would be fundamentally reshaped. China's rise would come sooner, but with new alliances and rivalries. The world map would be redrawn. Side by side, neither China is a utopia. Each path brings its own mix of progress and pain. Communist China endured horrors like famine and persecution, but achieved radical social change and economic transformation. Nationalist China would avoid Mao's disasters, preserve tradition, and develop a market economy sooner, but at the cost of inequality and repression. Winners and losers would shift, peasants and workers in one, urban elites in the other. The question of better depends on what you value: freedom, equality, tradition, or power. History hinges on moments. The Civil War's outcome was not inevitable. A few different choices could have changed everything, altering alliances, economies, and cultures worldwide. By imagining a different China, we see how fragile and contingent our present really is. The world we know was shaped by 1949's outcome, a reminder that history is full of roads not taken. Every future is built on the choices of the past.